Okay. Right. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. Chris from Down to Earth has asked if he could do a quick update. It's not on the agenda, so if we take that under item 3, public participation, then Chris isn't having to hang around and wait till the end of the meeting. Okay, so we'll start with any apologies, Steve?
Yeah, I've had apologies from Councillor Mike Parking.
Okay. Right, and that's all. So we're a few missing, aren't we?
I thought that Rebecca wasn't coming.
No, Rebecca said Rebecca is going to be a few minutes late.
Oh, right,
but
that's
is
fine.
coming. Yeah. Okay, are there any declarations of interest? Anything anybody's got?
Just my personal remuneration.
We now know that's fine. Okay, lovely. Right. Well, if we could suspend standing orders in order to see if, we do have 2 members of the public. But if we could start with Chris giving us an update, because that might generate some questions as well. And then we'll take any other questions that there are from members of the public. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year to everybody. Yes, there's a quick update on the development of the Offstream project. Last time we came along, we discussed the consultation, which had just closed. So since that moment, we've taken the data and we've collated it all. And from that, we created the design brief, which we sent out to members of the committee over Christmas. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a little look at that. We had some responses back. At the same time, we've used the information to create an infographic, which basically just puts that information in hopefully a nice, easy to understand format. So we're looking to distribute that to the public once it's translated. We've got the translation in today, so that should be translated by and made by the end of the week. So we'll get that out end of the week, early next week, so that people can get some feedback about what the results of the consultation were. In terms of the feedback from the committee, it feels like everybody's broadly in line with the vision that we've put into the design brief, which means that now we can go on to the next stage, which is to sort of tighten that brief up to make sure that we're including all the things that you want as a client, into the building, into the development. Hopefully then we can work with your subgroup to tighten up that brief and to, to kind of perhaps put a little bit more detail into that. At the same time, then we are concurrently looking at funding opportunities. I haven't got huge amounts of great news on the funding side, in that a lot of the avenues we've explored have been tricky due to your status as a community council. So it seems that quite a lot of the funding bodies that we would traditionally go to, they don't tend to fund community councils. They tend to fund charities, social businesses, and so on. So we might need to think a little creatively about how we look at funding. Obviously, the purpose is for community benefit, and so there are lots of people who want to fund things that are for community benefit. So it's possibly just a case of pitching it in a certain way, or finding a vehicle in which we can get that funding through. We do have a couple of possibilities, ones with Transforming Towns, who are a part funder, between 50 and 70%. I think, Will, you thought it was 70%, didn't you? And another sort of local authority fund as well. So yeah, that's where we're at with funding, but obviously not taking my eye off the ball on that one. And we've got some links with that Paul Bynon found for us with other community councils. And I think what we'll do is we'll explore the ways that other community councils have found funding for similar sorts of projects. I think possibly things like lottery might be a good call as well. So I'm exploring heritage and community fund as well. So that's where we're at the moment. Has anyone got any questions for us at this stage?
Rebecca, sorry, before you speak, Rebecca, Steve, I have a request from Helen. Apparently she's in the waiting room. Can you see her there?
Yeah, she's just come in now, Chair. I'll let her in.
Okay. Yes, right, Rebecca, you had a question.
Thanks, Carrie. Sorry, Chris, I was a couple of minutes late and I did miss the beginning of what
No
you were
worries.
saying. So I really apologise if you've covered this. It's just a question I've had from one of the current users of the hall about timescales and when users can expect sort of the disruption to start, I suppose, or when they should be planning or perhaps trying to be a bit more flexible. I understand it's towards the end of the year, but I just didn't know whether you had any more information than that, really.
No, we don't have any information on that yet. The timescale we're trying to work to is that we would get the planning application in sort of middle of the summer, sort of June, July, with sort of 2 month or 3 month turnaround. So that would be like September, October for successful planning. Obviously, then there are all sorts of other potential pitfalls along the way, including getting funding for the actual build itself. So, I wouldn't expect realistically it to be happening before, the end of the year. No, well, towards the end of the year, I would say. So maybe October, November. Even then, I mean, obviously, we're going to have plenty of advanced warning. So we'd be able to give people that notice period. And we even can potentially, it depends because it's going to be a refurb. So potentially we can look at the way that we do it so that it might not be 100% disrupted all the time. It kind of depends on what people go for in terms of the plan. So yeah, we would definitely give you some, I'm sure it would be at least 6 months, if not more, notice.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Will.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Chris.
Welcome.
For the update. I'll try and get you confirmation on the Transforming Towns pot, exactly how much that is. I'll do that tomorrow and let the clerk know and yourself. Just to confirm though, that money that you're trying to get from the Transforming Towns, that is for what exactly? Is that for the architectural design side? That's to make what we currently, and that'll take us up to the planning stage. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the idea. And then, but hopefully they they'll be interested enough to perhaps look at the bigger pot as well for the actual development. Okay, great. So at this stage though, if it's only up to the first amount that we're asking for, and it's only either 50 or 70%, are you looking for grants for that other 50 or 30%, or absolutely, yeah. So we're throwing the net pretty wide and trying to kind of, because often match is a good way. Once you've got somebody in the thing, then others will kind of follow because they think, well, okay, yeah, we can trust this. So yeah, it's definitely a good thing. It's just that we seem to be coming up against the issue around the community council not being eligible for a lot of the pots we've traditionally looked at.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is obviously if you don't think it's realistic that other 30% or 50% is funded up to the architectural stage, for example, we need to know fairly quickly because we do our budget for next year. Well, at the moment, so we need. I would suggest, if you can do it, to put a good lump of money against the project as a backup anyway, and then anything's a bonus then, isn't it? So that wouldn't stop you from applying for further grants, do you mean? No, I mean, as long as you'd be able to, via or whatever, move money around if we didn't have to use it, then that would make sense to me, is that you put it in the budget, and then if you're able to move it again, if we manage to do better with the application. I mean, the other thing to bear in mind is that everything is going up, as you all know, and so we've got to be careful about what's costing 50,000 now might not be the same in 2 or 3 months' time. It's not an easy time to be kind of estimating. I think there is a worry really that things might go up as well. Okay, so Chair, sorry to speak again, but we've got this subgroup we're trying to meet, aren't we? Yeah. So if we discuss this in more detail there, that'd be great. Okay. Cool. Superb. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Has anyone else got any questions for Chris? No? Okay, lovely. Well, thanks ever so much for that, Chris. It's very useful to get regular updates. And as
Great.
Will said, we are trying to get a meeting together of the Austrian working group to obviously be able to discuss with you, you know, these things in more detail about exactly how we proceed from here.
Super.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you very
Lovely.
much for having me.
thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Is there any member of the public who has any questions before we reconvene the meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Um,
right.
Thank you, Chair. I have spoken to some people previously about this, about what we can do for local traders in and around Mumbles. Most of them are struggling at the moment. I'm not saying we give them financial aid, but it could be signage, could be a multitude of things. I just wondered if committee has sat down at a reasonable discussions about this, of how we can move forward and help them in the future, particularly with the work that's going on at the seawall. I think it could be do or die for a lot of businesses. And I just would like the committee to have a real sit down, serious discussion about this.
I believe signage is actually on the remit of culture, communications, and whatever it is, tourism,
Yes.
which, as I explained to you, Michael, is Phil is the chair of. So that's the relevant committee, obviously, that would be able to look at things like signage.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's, you know, something that the committee can look at. In terms of tourism and communication with local traders, that's obviously something that falls under our remit. In terms of, you know, other support for, of course, local businesses, you know, then there may be ways that local businesses can apply for small grants if they're doing something for the community. That would fall then under Ian's purview as the chair of the Finance and Compliance Committee. So yeah, but I mean, certainly, you know, if there's a wider discussion to be had, I'm more than happy to engage in that.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Uh,
Phil.
Sorry,
Sarah?
I was just going to say, I know there isn't for the community council, but the council have got some pots of money. If I pass you on to Rebecca, because she's probably remember the exact word name of the budget that was mentioned the other day.
Yeah, I was going to raise that, Sarah. So the Welsh Government have made business rates relief support available, which is being administered via the council. So there is some support for local businesses, and we can certainly endeavour to make sure that in Mumbles we're fully apprised of the information for businesses to be able to share with them as well to get that support.
Thanks, Rebecca. Helen?
Thank you. I think this is an important point, isn't it? You know, just walking down Newton Road in the last few weeks, the number of shops, you know, Barclays is going. You know, I think this is quite an important thing that warrants a discussion item in itself, because it is likely to be spread over several committees, and, you know, signage and bits and bobs like that. It's not really the answer. It's just part of a bigger answer. So I wonder, you know, that community plan, Carrie, that was developed by Urban Foundry for Mumbles Community Council. I obviously wasn't involved in that. That was before my time. But, you know, is that a document that we can draw on to kind of look for ideas, or can we involve more people in this sort of discussion? Because I think it is an important discussion to have around the future of the high street in Mumbles. And I'm sure there's loads of other similar places. I was just talking to Criccieth Clark the other day in a work capacity, and they've done really good things up there to rejuvenate their high street and support local businesses, not just from a tourism perspective, but broader. And I'm sure there's stuff to learn from what other places are doing, but I think this warrants quite a full discussion.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Very good question, Mr. Eames. Excellent question. I think some of this has been discussed in the past, going back a number of years ago, and in particular with regards to appropriate signage. Now, we have the benefit of a meeting coming up now with the in connection with the sea defences, and a lot of that you can umbrella it under the infrastructure. And similarly, I think community council should be umbrellaing a number of things under the infrastructure, and in particular for signage. Greater use of notice boards. We have one outside the Austrian Hall, and it's only available to certain parties to put things in it. And we should be inviting people to sell themselves in those notice boards. Greater use of the website. Last full council meeting, we had the pleasure of a lady giving us a talk on the Gower bus service and bringing it into Mumbles. I personally think it's a great idea because we're increasing the footfall. The other thing, of course, is maybe we should be leaning on our city councillors to lean on the city council and community council of what they can do about the car park charges. You know, maybe they could reduce the levies. Maybe they could work in conjunction with First Cymru and provide free bus services coming to Mumbles. These things are all very important. And what comes to mind in particular, the past couple of weekends, the weather has been pretty good, and the car parks down in Langland, both of them, were absolutely chock-a-block-o. Fantastic. How much money is that bringing in every year? Probably about £500,000, something like that. And we don't get a penny of it. You know, they can't even repair the wall that's down there. So there are things that could be done to help local businesses, I'm sure. And Councillor Keaton has just suggested the Mumbles Development Trust making a grant. Well, I think we should be looking a little bit further than that. But anyway, I'll leave it at that because it's going to be a long night as it is. But thanks for the question.
And Richard? You're on mute.
Yeah, just a brief note. Now, Treorchy, completely different to Mumbles, I know, but it's a small area, historically, and still has a lot of deprivation and not so money. People don't have so much money to spend there as they do here, and they've won awards for their high street. Perhaps it's worth liaising with people like that, the local council there, to see how they went around that. I think it was mainly associated with encouraging independent traders as opposed to big names. And on saying that, Mumbles has quite a few independent traders, which is good. Another one was Cardigan. They reinvigorated their town, but that's a lot bigger than Mumbles, but perhaps something to learn. In the summer, I was up in Harlow, and I noticed when I was paying for my parking, 10% of the parking fees go to the community council there. I did take a photograph of that, put it on our WhatsApp page to see if anybody was interested. Things like that could be done, but again, it's thinking outside the box, liaising with the city council as well. Yes, as a community council, maybe limited what we can do, but there must be things we can do. I know things have been done in the past. For instance, with COVID, the tentage and all that down in Southend Gardens, that encouraged more use of the hospitality. There's perhaps more to be thought in that direction, perhaps further up Newton Road as well. There's things we can do, I'm sure, just finding them.
Thanks, Richard. Angela?
Yeah, I was just saying it's a good question, Michael. It is something that's on our minds, particularly the coastal defence project and the less parking that we'll have. And there will be an opportunity for people to come on Thursday. But parking is a big issue, and we are trying to sort out something out with the park and ride, which would be good because we are going to lose quite a few spaces. So it is a concern that we will lose car parking spaces in Mumbles, more so. But yeah, any ideas are welcome. Could we speak to the council about that, about the car parking charges?
Yeah, well, I think it's too much since I jump in, Carrie. Yeah,
we are.
I'll be good. Mine, obviously, really good question. I think undoubtedly everyone's in support of businesses in Mumbles. I know the three of us have engaged a few times prior to Christmas with businesses more towards the top end of Newton Road. So the things are going on behind the scenes where we're trying to see where we can help. All really great ideas, and I think that it's great and positive that everyone's hopefully on the same page. Then I think there's accumulation. There's not going to be just one thing that's going to solve it. It's going to be a multi approach to it, whether that's parking, reducing the fees. But if I can just sort of reassure Mike that we will be in touch with the businesses and residents as we move forward, and hopefully we can sort of all pull together and go through some what will be unprecedented times, I'm sure. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, right, just one comment from me. I need to say, of course, we do have Mumbles traders who are there to represent the businesses, and perhaps they are someone who should be, or we should be engaging with, they should be engaging with us, because I think there's probably a lot more potential for us supporting the traders than there is for us supporting individual businesses.
Can I say good?
Can I say something, Chair?
Right. The business rates relief is offered by Swansea Council, not the Mumbles Development Trust.
Yes.
Thanks.
Do you mind if I
Okay.
say one more thing, Chair?
Anything else? Oh, sorry, Helen just wants to say, well, yeah, can you be really quick, Helen, because we do need to move on.
I think we need an action about how we're going to take this forward. Because I think there's a lot of ideas just in the last few minutes, and I think if there's anything we can do.
The public, we've suspended standing orders for the moment, so we can't make any kind of formal resolutions at this stage. But obviously we can look at it as an agenda item for the future. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I did speak to Mr. Whitaker regarding this as well, and I am hoping when he's back he's going to get in touch. But
Okay.
I just think it's something that I know I can't propose it, but perhaps one of the councillors will propose some sort of meeting or think tank and some concrete plan to go forward in the future. And it's great, everybody's got ideas and plans and thoughts, but we need something concrete written down that we can relate to and the residents, because we're all part of this community, and the greatest supporter of the community is the community. And unless we all get involved, we're going to go nowhere. We're just going to have a ghost town. So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Do we have any other questions from, I think there's only one other member of the public here now. No. Okay, so is that a right? I was just saying to the new person who's just arrived, this is the opportunity for members of the public to speak. So if you've just joined and you do have a question, now is your opportunity, otherwise we'll move on. Right, okay, right, so we'll reconvene the meeting, please, and move on to item 4, minutes of the monthly meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read them? Is everybody agreed that they are an accurate record?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody happy with those? I'll take that as yes. Nobody's saying anything otherwise. Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to the chair's report, clerk's report. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone. Secondly, just to give you advice of where we are with our 3 vacancies. As you're probably all aware, the first will be filled by the election being held literally here in the Ostream on Thursday. The other 2 will be advertised tomorrow, and we will have to wait to see whether they result in further elections or co-option. But that's just to give you a brief outline of where we are with the vacancies at the moment. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to raise?
Okay, has anybody got any questions for the clerk? Rob?
Yep. Hi, Steve. Happy New Year back to you. Just wondering when the report on the complaint from Llwyndera School is likely to be ready?
Well, as you know, I've not been involved with that other than being a witness. I don't know whether Paul would be able to advise on that.
Yeah, I can. Thanks, Steve. Everybody's been interviewed by the resolution panel, and what it needs now is a report to be put together. I've been tasked with that, so what my intention is, once we've got a budget put together, I'll move on to that. It is taking quite a lot of time to put together, but I think what we hope to get something to you before next council, and then maybe you can go to the council in February.
Brilliant, because I mean it was a long time since I gave my detailed timeline in October. Yeah. So can we add the delay onto the report? The fact it's taken so long as well.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Paul.
Very quickly.
Okay, well.
Yeah, Steve, just trying to sort out a meeting with the Ostream committee. I think we need to do that fairly urgently. If we could have a chat about or action that, please.
Okay, yeah, have a chat with me tomorrow, Will. We'll sort it out.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, right. Thanks, Steve. Right. Item 6, Chair's report.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I put a motion that we move on to the next item, understanding order number 10, because we've all read the report, and as you say, we're in for a long evening, so it makes sense to move on to it.
Could I please read the report? Is everybody?
I'd rather you didn't.
Is everybody happy that we do? Yeah, everybody else is fine with that. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to start by wishing everybody a happy and peaceful new year. Glad to see you all back. Much of last month was taken up with Christmas, so MCC, obviously the office has not been busy as usual, but there have been some interesting and enjoyable events that have taken place. I represented MCC at the annual Lifeboat Carol service, which was a lovely event, and was the last one, which will be led by the Reverend Keith Evans, as he has now retired. So it was quite a sad occasion as well, as he said goodbye to that role. The Warm Spaces events at Ostream and West Cross had a jolly Christmas feel, with bauble painting at both centres, as well as Christmas music and songs by Dave Cottle and our very own Rosie Coos, who has just popped up in the guise of Steve. Is that interesting? Right. There have been now award Christmas events held in West Cross and Males, both of which were fantastically successful. Absolutely brilliant. Well done to Rebecca and Helen, who were the leading lights in both of those events. And indeed, today we had the Oyster Mouth Christmas event, which was also fantastically successful. Everybody absolutely loved it. And thoroughly enjoyed the film as well. We didn't get as many people staying for the film as, you know, perhaps we'd hoped, but those who were there thought it was absolutely wonderful. And I'd like to thank Andy and Lynn from Mumbles Yacht Club. They did put on the most fantastic lunch for everybody, and second helpings were had, and people went away very full. Okay. Right, and just to say, from Tuesday, January 17th, our weekly Coffee with Friends at Ostream will become Lunch with Friends, and the West Cross Warm Space will also be offering hot food at West Cross Community Centre on Fridays. So if you could just spread the word as much as you can for those two events, because hopefully being able to provide some hot food will attract people to come along. On Sunday, January the 8th, which of course has now passed, I did indeed attend the farewell service for the Reverend Keith Evans, who has now retired as Vicar of All Saints, and he will be much missed. He's been a fantastic supporter of a whole range of community events, not just for the church and the congregation, but really reaching out to the whole community, supporting homeless shelters, baby banks, food banks, and all sorts of other things as well. So yeah, it was a sad event to say goodbye to him, particularly as Oystermouth Parish will now cease to exist, because they are reorganising it and it will no longer be an individual parish. It is, yes. Okay, 2023 will be a challenging year for MCC, our residents and our local businesses, with a continuing cost of living and energy crises on top of the ongoing climate emergency that we need to be ever mindful of. The energy crisis has been caused in some large part by our continued reliance on fossil fuels. And at the One Voice Wales Innovation Conference, we were reminded by Audit Wales that we are obliged as community councils to meet the Welsh Government carbon reduction targets by 2030, despite the additional costs that this will incur. So that's 7 years away. We really are running out of time to make sure that everything we do is working towards that carbon reduction target. We have an opportunity with our future plans for the Austrian Centre to ensure that we move away from soon-to-be obsolete energy systems and create a flagship building which will be an exemplar of sustainable energy and carbon neutrality. I hope that our budget, which we will be setting this month, will reflect MCC's climate emergency declaration and ensure that all our planned programmes and projects not only support our residents and businesses through the current crisis, but also promote and support carbon reduction and a commitment to producing air, noise and light pollution for the benefit of wildlife and our stunning natural environment, as well as residents and visitors. Okay, thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Rob? You're on mute.
Thank you. Just wondered if there was a written report available on the meeting you and the Vice Chair had last week with Councillor Robert Francis Davis.
There probably is. Certainly Steve took notes.
Oh, that'll be available for next meeting then, will it?
Yeah, I can send, I did notes. I'll send everyone a copy now and you can have a look at them.
Thanks,
Okay.
Steve. Cheers.
Okay, right. We now move on to the financial report, and obviously we have Paul here, so I will hand over to him to take us through item 7, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. As you said, December is usually a fairly quiet month, but if you look at the list of payments we've made this month, we're just shy of £500,000, which is I'm glad we're not paying checks at the moment, because that would have taken ages to get those written out and signed. But obviously most of that is due to the significant projects which are ongoing out Underhill and the skate park. So not totally unexpected, but it is a lot of money for a community council to be paying out in 1 month. So I've listed all the payments in section 1 of the report, and also the Barclaycard purchases. So the proposal is that retrospective approval is given to those payments.
Okay, are we all happy to approve retrospective approval for all those payments in the main list and also the Barclaycard purchases? Yeah, okay, lovely, thanks. Thanks,
Okay.
Paul.
Okay, so, sorry, just to finish off, Chair, the other parts of the report then are the income we've received. There's the 2 grants there which have come in for from Swansea Council, the successful grant applications for the warm hubs and the direct food, and also the third precept instalment for the current year. And then on the last page of the report, we've got the current balances as at the 3rd of January, and also the budget monitoring report to the 30th of November. So that shows the 41.1% of the budget had been spent to the end of November. Obviously, the December payments aren't included in that, so we will be way over 50%. I think when this report comes back to you in February.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Paul. Has anybody got any questions or comments for Paul about finance report or the budget monitoring? No? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item 8, which is consider what the preset should be for 2023-24 financial year. Now, if I could just explain why we've put this on, because that gives us the steer for how we should be setting the budget when we come to do that at the end of the month. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we don't be too rigid. We want to stay as close as possible to what the precept is at the moment, but we are all aware that all costs have gone up. And if we want to stick to last year's precept, in reality, we're talking about a 10% cut in everything. So I am suggesting we might want to allow ourselves a little bit of flexibility, so we're not forced into a position where we're having to cancel things that we actually genuinely really want to do and that our residents would like to see us do. So I'm suggesting we kind of set a sort of parameter that it will be no more than X percentage increase on last year's, and I would welcome people's thoughts and comments about where they feel it should sit. First question from Paul.
Yeah, not a question, Chair. If I could just say that the number of properties that Swansea Council have identified for Mumbles is reduced for next year as well. So this year we had 10,089 properties. It's gone down to 9,909, so it's 180 properties down. And when I asked them, the reason for that is that they expect the collection rate to be reduced. Same thing happened last year. They think because of COVID and because of the cost of living crisis that the properties, the payments will decline. So that's why they reduced the property number. So if we keep if you keep the precept as it is, that would also lead to a £10,500 reduction in the budget. So we're currently at 585,000. Just to keep it the same, we'd be down to 574,000. Plus, then you've also got the impact of inflation, currently at 10%, as you mentioned, Chair.
Okay, well that's a sobering thought to add into the mix. Has anybody got any ideas or suggestions as to where? I mean, you may feel that at this stage we don't want to set a fixed amount anyway, and that's absolutely fine if people feel they'd rather wait until we see the budget and then make a decision. But we have Richard.
Thank you. You know, funny enough, I was checking my bills last night. I noticed the precept hasn't gone up since 2018, 2019.
That's right.
They've kept it the same, although I know it had gone up quite a bit some years ago. I don't know when, that's before my time. Mm-hmm. Yes, there is a cost of living crisis, which we need to bear in mind. So if we are going to put it up, as about flexibility, we could agree to, if necessary, put up a certain amount. Inflation is 10%. Perhaps if we agreed, if necessary, to put up by 5%, then we'd take into consideration a bit of a cost of living crisis as well. Just interested what other people think.
Okay, thanks, Richard. That's very much along the lines that I was thinking as well, I must admit. Has anybody else got any comments? Phil?
I was just going to ask Paul, actually, whether there's a figure that actually holds us at zero, as it were, at balance.
Sorry, what do you mean?
He means losing 100, 200 properties. What would the increase need to be?
Yes. What would, Paul, do you have a figure that would actually keep us at balance?
What if we stay the same?
So if from what you've said, obviously there's going to be a reduction if we don't have any increase. but to order to maintain where we are at this moment in time, okay, what percentage increase would that be?
To maintain the budget?
To maintain the budget.
Not the brief, to maintain the budget, right?
Yeah, to maintain the budget at 585,000. Well, if you had a 2% increase, that would give you a budget of 586,000. So that's the nearest to it, and that would take the preset up then from £57.99 to £59.15.
Okay, so over a year, that's about very small.
Yeah.
£2 over a year, yeah. Okay, Rebecca, I think you were next.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is a bit, it's a very difficult exercise, and I think it's probably worth us just taking a minute to reassure residents that we're obviously not going to put it up any more than we need to, in order to provide the things that, you know, they benefit from, and that through consultation and ongoing conversation we know that are important to them. I think the thing about us being a community council as opposed to city council is that we don't have a huge amount that year on year has to be the same. You know, we don't provide services that just go and go and go and go. So I would probably support Richard's proposal of a no more than 5% increase, but I personally would actually rather us look at the things that are in our budget and to ask the question, is now the right time for all of those things? And if because that's the trade-off, isn't it? Either you increase the precept or you do less things, because with inflation, you know, the money doesn't go as far. And actually, I think we do need to carefully look at the option of do fewer things before we come to a fixed position on this. So support the no more than increase, but wouldn't want to hold us to the 5% if actually ultimately we decide that we could make savings in other ways.
Yeah, no, that sounds very sensible. I could totally agree with that. Helen?
Just to support what Rebecca was saying, I think in these times, ideally we wouldn't increase the precept because, you know, so many people are just really struggling to make ends meet in a completely fundamental way. And I think even if £2 per annum doesn't sound a huge lot, but in many people's heads, the perception and the optics of it is a Mumbles Community Council putting the precept up at a time of complete hardship. So but I think what Rebecca has said is really sensible. Is, you know, we've drafted our environment budget. You know, I completely think that we should be looking at that with just the absolute, you know, what are the priorities, and I'm sure all of us can approach the budget in that way. So I completely agree with what Rebecca's just said.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Ian.
Yes, thank you. I think councillors must be aware of the fact that the precept went up considerably going back to 2017, 17, 18 and so on. And the other thing, of course, is that, you know, the circumstances are such, because we took on such, shall we say, large projects, namely the skate park, and you know, which initially was going to be £100,000 project, has gone up in excess of probably 650,000 now. And similarly with the Underhill development, you know, that has increased considerably as well. Now, not everyone is going to be using the skate park, and not everyone's going to be playing soccer and rugby. You know, we have a community that's increasing in their age, and we ought to be taking account of that. Their incomes aren't going up all the time, so they will find it hard, there's no question of it. Similarly, there are those young families whose mortgage rates that are going to be going up considerably, and you know, we should be taking all those things into account. So personally speaking, I'm not an advocate of the precept going up. It was good of Richard to point out the fact that you know, it hasn't increased. Well, we had very good reason for not increasing it, and I think we're in a similar scenario now. We ought to think very, very carefully about what we do, I think all budgets pending should be trimmed back accordingly. And that's just my opinion, but I probably will have more to say about it in the future. Thank you.
Okay, so, sorry.
Sorry, I've got a further question for you, Paul. In terms of our carried over reserves, what are we looking at, you know, what is there anything sort of unaccounted for in next year that we're carrying over for? I mean, if we're actually thinking of digging into those carried over reserves to prop us up or anything like that, is that all accounted for in your figure?
Yeah, we've got two types of reserves. We've got general reserves, which is meant to cover unexpected occurrences which may happen, and then earmark reserves. And the earmark reserves are then carried forward for a specific purpose. Although there's no reason why they can't be moved for other things. But all the ones carried forward would be for a specific purpose.
So the reason I wanted to ask that question is because obviously, and not to sound like one of the many former prime ministers, that there's a third way in doing things, is to obviously, you know, consider the fact that, you know, there may be, yes, Rebecca, you're right about looking at making sure our budgets are reflect what we can carry out in the services that you can do. Yes, Richard, you're quite right in terms of thinking about you know, being able to continue the work that we are doing, but actually by using some of those reserves, by being prudent, by being able to work things around, I wouldn't like to see the option of a very small increase being ruled out at this stage. I think there are three ways, you know, of doing this, but I absolutely agree with Ian and others around the tables that any increase would have to be absolutely justified. You know, and but I do think, you know, we need to look at, you know, those sort of three routes, three avenues, as it were. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm trying to kind of formulate a recommendation from those various comments, and I've sort of come up with something on the lines of perhaps that we look at setting a preset that ideally will be no more than 3% increase in the current preset, and under no circumstances and only in exceptional circumstances would it increase by up to 5%. So what we're saying, that would be basically that we're looking at, in reality, that we might have to, just to make sure that things that are really important can continue to be done. I mean, there's just basic things like, you know, office costs, staff costs, they've all gone up, and there's likely to be pay increases which will further make them go up. So we've got to address, those are our fixed costs. We can't change those. We can't turn around to our staff and say, sorry, we're going to give you a pay cut to save money on the preset. So there are things, unfortunately, where we will have no choice but to increase the budget for, and obviously the more of those there are, the less we have then to actually play around with. So that's why I'm suggesting that we say, ideally, we look at wherever possible, making savings to keep the preset at no more than a 3% increase, and only in exceptional circumstances, if there is very strong justification for it, we may consider increasing it to 5%. Does that sort of cover?
Can we have no preset at all, as in it doesn't go up at all?
Yeah.
We can, but this allows us, as I say, the reality is there's a lot of increases we've got to cover anyway.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But a lot of businesses aren't even increasing, you know,
No, I know,
their
right.
salaries and things like that, and maybe we just cut certain events or something that we
Yeah, that's all possible. But that's what I'm suggesting, this, you can then, you know, look at something, because, you know, we have to make a decision. I'm just thinking that allows us to keep the precept where it is, but if we, when it comes to budget setting, we're actually in a position where we cannot agree to cut any further, that we do have that option to put it up by £2 or £3 a year.
I'll just jump in, Chair, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and then there's two people.
Thanks, very quickly. We're all in agreement, I think, that we need to look at the precept, and as Rebecca alluded to, it should only be, you know, stuff that's absolutely necessary, but identifying that things have gone up. I think this is a sort of conversation which I don't think really needs to happen at this stage, because I think we're all aware of the situation financially, and we're all aware of the responsibility we have as a council to everyone's household budget. So although I understand why you put it on the agenda, without seeing the budget, I don't feel comfortable making a decision either way, because there might be, for example, stuff that, you know, we feel we can't live without. But equally, there might be stuff that we can and we want to take out. So I think it's a bit pointless, if I'm completely honest.
I think Paul needs to have some figure to work towards. We need to have a budget within which we have to work to help him in terms of, because he's going to have to be actually setting the budget on the day that we have the meeting.
Yeah.
There's going to be no flexibility, unfortunately, on that night.
We've not done all that in the past, though, have we?
No, but we are doing, yes, we have.
We've ripped through the budget sometimes. I mean, once it came out at 900,000 and we just sat there for hours and made sure we.
Yeah, but to say, well, we then had a second meeting this time, but the meeting is not until the 31st of January. There is no option for a second meeting or even to go on for hours, because we've run out of time and we wouldn't have a precept at all. So that's why we're trying where possible, and that's why we're trying to approve some of our core budgets.
Does that
here?
But that then means that Paul is the one identifying what we should be spending money on, because Paul will be running the budget.
No, Paul will know what the figure is that we are trying to work down to.
Yes, but then Paul will be setting in what he thinks is right.
No, he'll be telling us how big the cake is,
yeah.
and we'll be.
And each time we cut something, he will go back and say, right, we've now up to this amount.
I understand.
He won't set the budget, no.
Well, exactly. We might as well do that on the night then. This makes no difference at all.
Well, if we put it to the vote, that might be a, you know, you can vote against it.
I just don't see.
Because I just feel that we want to set some sort of parameters that we have at least a top limit that we're not going to go above.
All right, can I put it a different way and be quite honest? Who is going to sit down with Paul and do the draft budget? Are you planning to sit down with him and go over the budget before?
Before what?
Before the meeting.
Well, I mean, all the committees hopefully will look at their budgets and
but once
their decisions. Yes, I will
exactly
obviously sit down and go through
So
it.
you will draft the budget, which we will all then vote on.
No, the budget, nothing will be taken out of the budget. All Paul and I will do is look at where there may be things we could suggest to councillors. We could make some savings, but no, we have no authority to take anything out of committee budgets.
I know that, but once you start moving and discussing things inevitably go a certain way. I think I don't.
Is there anything particular you're concerned about?
Yes,
I'm concerned about it seems a hierarchical control of the budget.
Oh, I thought you were worried about the Austrian, because they were saying about Austrian.
No, nothing in particular. Nothing in particular. I just think by setting an arbitrary figure, right, constrains the council at a point, and I don't really see the point in the conversation, this whole conversation right now, because
there's a couple of us who've been trying to come in from the Zoom for a little.
You have spoken once, and I hadn't actually spoken, Rebecca. Okay,
I know, Will, but I was going to back you up, so will you let me?
Oh, yeah.
It was just to say, it was to ask Paul if we've got this, this sort of rough 3 to 5%, sort of roughly where it looks like consensus is coming. The process that we normally go through that Will is describing, where we've got a figure that we're trying to get down to, can we have both the 3% and the 5% figure in front of us on the 31st of January. And I agree that I don't know that we need to make a hard and fast decision now, but we've at least had a discussion that means we've got those figures in front of us come the 31st of January to inform discussion. Is that like a helpful
Yeah, it's a
compromise?
target. rather than a-
I can give you those figures now if it's helpful.
Right, leave it till then, or we'll get confused. But yeah, I think that's fine. If we don't want to make a formal decision now, but I think we have got a general consensus that we are looking to keep as close as possible to the budget, and we can see what the reality would be of a 3% or 5% increase.
Sorry, Chair, can I just suggest that when I do the budget report, I'll put in the budget at 0%, 3% and 5%. And then that will give you the figures then that you need to move to reach either of those three budgets.
Yeah, thank you.
But,
That would be
you know,
perfect. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks.
Pam?
I found this really useful actually, because when we go into our final meeting, which will come before the budget meeting, the whole committee will have a clear idea of what we can and what we can't do. So if Paul can give us an idea before that meeting of what a 3% increase will look like and what we put forward last year, then I think that would be really useful for chairs to have that going into these months' meeting.
Okay, yes,
thank you, Paul.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Rob?
Helen was next, Carrie.
It's okay, you go first, Rob.
Okay.
That's why I'm suggesting you might want to go first.
Agree totally with what Will is saying on this. We need figures in front of us before we can do it. What I don't want is to be in the situation we were in last year, come the budget meeting, when we're told that certain things from our budget have been taken out, and there was no way to seem to debate these things. It had all been decided before the budget meeting. So I don't want to be in that position again.
Helen?
Well, presumably all the committees have got draft budgets already. You know, in the Environment Committee, we've got a draft budget and we'll be finalising it in the next week or so. So I do think the 3% to me was arbitrary, because I wouldn't know how to apply that to my own committee. And there's huge amounts of underspend from projects going back in the Environment Committee, going back several years. And I think we've got to get to a position of spending some of that money. So is there I don't know how this process works, but is there an opportunity for the draft budgets to all go to Paul or somebody, and for him to have a sense of how the budget is looking?
That's exactly what happened.
Let us all know. So if he
put that together, but there is no then opportunity for us to discuss it further until the meeting, because we won't be meeting again until we actually set the budget. But Paul will collate all those budgets from across the committees, yes.
So I mean, certainly as chair of the Environment Committee, I'll be really looking at that budget and with my colleagues on that committee, and just thinking what is absolutely necessary and what, you know, so I think committee chairs need to do that in advance.
Yeah, they do, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just come in, Chair, what I intend doing is to send a copy of each committee's proposed budget to the chairs, so that they can go to the committees in the coming weeks then for approval or amendment and approval.
That's great. That's lovely. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so shall we agree to not make a formal resolution, but if we all bear in mind in the forthcoming committee meetings that those are the kinds of figures that there is a general view across councillors that we want to make sure that we keep within. Okay, thanks ever so much. Right, back to Paul. So these are some of our central costs, and if we can tick these off now, it just reduces the work that we have to do, and then we can just focus on the committee budgets when we come to meet again at the end of the month. So Paul, if you want to talk through these.
Yeah, I'll just briefly, Chair. There's four budgets here. First is the office costs. They're fairly straightforward. It's just things just for running the office. Hopefully there'll be no costs payable to Offstream after we sign the license agreement, so that will significantly reduce the amount that we pay. So that's all fairly straightforward, and hopefully everybody's in agreement with what's there for office costs.
Okay, so if we take those first, is there anybody who's got any violent objections to the draft budget of £2,450 for office costs? I think we're all in agreement there. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you all. The next one then is the payroll budget. It doesn't include the 2 Offstream staff who are going to come over, because I've included them in the Offstream Centre budget, but ultimately they will end up in this budget. This is based on and includes the current year's pay award, which varied between 4% and 10% depending on what grade you're on, because it was a fixed amount, the pay award. It includes an increment for everybody who's due one, but they will only get that increment if they have a successful appraisal. And I've also assumed a 5% pay award for next year across the board. No basis for that, just potentially with a higher rate of inflation, that maybe that's what it's going to be. I've got nothing to support it. So that's included in the all the payroll costs. I've included the IPRW remuneration payments, the cost of our payroll accountant, and also HR support, which is only then the monthly fee that we pay the HR consultant. It assumes there's no recruitment next year, which may not be a very realistic assumption based on the current year, but I think that's probably the best we could put together at the moment.
Okay, right. So it has gone up, as I tried to say earlier. We recognise, that we are not going to refuse our staff nationally agreed pay awards. At least I sincerely hope we're not. So the reality is that those costs have and will go up. Are we all happy to agree with Paul's recommendation for the staff budget for next year?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Okay, Paul, next one.
Okay, the next one is general fund, which is basically a catch-all. It's everything else that doesn't come under a committee or office costs. There are some costs in there which have increased this year, so I've reflected those costs. Things like some of the IT systems we use, they've put their prices up, so I have increased those as well. One of the biggest increases is elections. Obviously, the current year, the election in May. Swansea Council did tell us that this time last year that the cost of that election would be charged in the year following the election, which I took to mean next year. But they've actually invoiced us for this year. To them, it means that in the current year, which is not what they actually said. So I've included the cost of that election in the current year, plus the one that's already been held in Wales, and then the other 3 outstanding elections. I've assumed they won't charge us until next year, even though I know one is being held this week. So that's a significant increase on the current year. Sorry, on this year's current budget. And then the only other significant budget in there is the council's individual fund, which is increased in the current year because of the earmark reserve that was carried forward. And I've assumed then that it stays at its current level of £1,000 per councillor. So Emmy's got any questions on that budget?
Will?
Thanks. Yeah, just a quick question. I understand obviously there's by-election costs, but the election in May, I wasn't actually aware that we had to pay for that. How much is it, if you don't mind me asking?
It's 9,600.
9,600. Okay, so it is a lot cheaper considering it's the whole ward and thing. I mean, I don't know if it's worth bringing up One Voice. You're on One Voice Wales, but that's a lot of money for community councils to pay for, seeing as all they're doing is print. It's a second lot of paper, and then they counted them up the next day. It's not.
Well, it's quite a lot more than that, but yes. No, we have actually, interestingly, we have discussed it, and there is an amazing discrepancy across different local authorities, with some charging more than Swansea does, some charging less.
Okay.
So it is something, in fact, that One Voice Wales are looking at, because quite rightly, they say, how can it cost more
Yeah.
in, you know, Merthyr
Yeah.
than it would cost in Pembrokeshire?
Yeah, and if they want to encourage community councils, then it should be something to look at.
So One Voice Wales is, but obviously that's something they're looking at. It's not something that we can.
They must be great minds then, because great minds think like it.
And also it's quite annoying that the 3 by-elections is £16,500, whereas for all the candidates for the May, it was 9,600.
Yeah, because they were held alongside other elections, so.
Chair, can I just, I was trying to get in on that as a point of information. Yeah, we're paying half then. We're paying half the cost then because of the other elections going on at the same time.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca.
I've got 2 questions, 3, sorry, they're all hopefully quite quick. First is, I noticed that carers allowance is in this budget. Is that all care, including like childcare, or is it for people who are registered carers? And is it just staff, or is it the councillors as well? My second question is the IT support and website elements. Are they currently wrapped into our contract with SA1? And thirdly, I notice you've got a bit of a question mark around the Welsh translation estimate that you've put in. I personally am a little concerned that 1,500 may not be enough, based on our ambition that we looked at the policy last month. But I suppose a big factor would be, does that include the translation of the newsletter, or is that going to come under the culture, tourism and communications budget?
Right. The carers allowance is just for councillors, so that would come out, and that would become under the IRPW recommendations. I'm not aware of there being a carers policy for staff. The IT are all separate from SA1. They are agreements we've got with Microsoft and with I think Catalyst, who will have the domain name. So they're all completely separate. And the translation doesn't include the newsletter, which at the moment is in the CTC committee. And as I guess as I put, it's a big guess. So if you want to propose an increase in that, I think possibly it probably should be higher than that. Steve?
Okay, thanks, Paul. Sorry, just before I move on to you, Steve, is that answered those, Rebecca?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, just on that point though, from what I recall, the council hasn't made a decision on whether it wants to have a bilingual newsletter. The policy doesn't state that. I mean, we may well want to have that, but we haven't actually agreed that yet.
Yeah, my concern was that if it did include the translation of the newsletter, it'd be gone. Like that £1,500 would go on just that. So yeah, I just wanted to be reassured really that it was to cover other things.
I think the other thing is Paul's going to be doing some more work on costing out the Welsh translation. So this figure, I guess, maybe can we put this as subject to change and confirmation on the 31st?
That was exactly what I was going to suggest. Could we perhaps approve everything with the exception of Welsh translation, because Paul has more work to do on getting a more accurate figure on that. And certainly I noticed Helen's comment, which sort of popped up on the screen, that seemed to think that it was considerably too low. Could I just remind councillors who use the chat, nobody in this room can see it. So please don't use the chat. If you have a comment, please put your hand up and make the comment to everybody in the room so that we all know what's going on, rather than it just being people who are on Zoom. Okay, so can I make that record that we approve everything with the exception of Welsh translation, which we will make a decision on at the budget setting?
I've got my hand up, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Right. Yes, I'm looking at the general fund now, and it's for 22-23, £67,200. Now, you know, maybe we should be looking to trim that sort of thing back. You've already mentioned the business of the Welsh translation.
We're setting the 23-24 budget, which is already 13,000 lower.
Well, that's £56,000.
Yes.
So I don't see, you know, it's very alarming when you look at the cost of these elections, if nothing else. But there's the councillors' individual funds, there's another £18,000 there. You know, if you look at this, I'm sure we could, you know, trim it back a wee bit before you start announcing, oh, we should agree to everything, excluding just the Welsh translation. You know, that could be very important to some people in the area. It may not apply to me, but I think we have to have a look at a lot that's going on, or what we're dealing with, because it is going to impact on the precept, and I'm not for the precept going up.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to discuss any of the other items in the general fund, accepting Welsh translation? And if not, then can we have a vote to agree all the general fund accepting Welsh translation? Okay, so those in favour of accepting.
I'm abstaining because I was out.
No, that's fine. Yeah, sure. Okay, so those in favour of agreeing the general fund accepting Welsh translation? Okay, I can't see Tim, but I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, so that will be carried. Those against? 1, and I know Francesca abstaining. Okay, thanks very much. Right, Paul, next one.
Okay, and the final one, Chair, is the Austrian Centre budget. So this will come into play when the licence agreement with the Austrian Community Association is signed.
This is long.
And I've assumed that takes place on the 1st of February, but that's still subject to confirmation. What I've tried to do with this budget this year is to make it the full impact of that new agreement. So this is what the costs would be, including the staff coming in from OCA, including all the other costs which we weren't picking up, because previously we were just picking up the cost of the building. So this will now include all things like the Austrian telephone and broadband and such like. And it also includes then the income that they would that would be paid. So that would be the income would now in future be paid to us rather than to OCA. So this is meant to be a budget for the whole of the Austrian. So I've got the expenditure and I've got the income. The loan repayment, which was coming back from the church for the roof, that will end this year. So there's no more income coming in for that. And obviously we won't be getting any rent from OCA. We will be getting all the take-ins for the centre. But what I've also done right at the end is some of the budgets in the current year won't have been spent. So where they are still available, I've identified those as earmarked reserves to be carried forward. So that will reduce some of the effect next year. And what's also in the budget, it's in the finance and compliance budget, is 25,000 for the Austrian new operating model, which is a guess I put in last year. And surprisingly, it's not far out from where we are. So once that transfers across there, that would leave a net impact of around 6,000 for the Austrian.
Which is pretty good. Okay, has anybody got any questions on? Thank you, Paul. That is really helpful. That's that's
maintenance.
Yeah, minor maintenance.
There's minor maintenance in there.
Yeah.
What line is that? I can't see it on the. Minor maintenance.
That's here, 1,000. Yeah, sort of in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Is that is there no sort of cushion, I suppose, you know, if something, yeah, because I think if, you know, now we are responsible for the venue. If something was to happen, boiler break could wipe that out, for example.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, more than.
window was smashed, or, you know, and also, as Ian pointed out a few times, you know, with the loose paving slabs outside of the wall slipping off, and some of those need to be done. You know, even 10 grand doesn't scratch the surface on stuff like that. So, you know, it is it's money that, you know, we could arguably take from reserves, and as long as we were comfortable knowing that there was, you know, reserves there, we don't need to set this. But as long as we know that if we ever deplete the reserves, there's no money for that. You know, we don't necessarily have to set a figure for it, because we could use reserves, but it might be prudent to do that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think it's something I hadn't really thought of, but yeah, it is something that is going to be so higher than the original £1,000 we put in.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there is also potential for increasing our income, which one would hope that is something that we will be looking at. Maybe I could suggest for maintenance.
Well,
sorry, can I just finish? That perhaps we actually have a sinking fund in the same way as we do for the Osprey, and we set a figure that every year we put money into that budget, and then when, you know, something major does happen, we've got that money there being held, which we can then use rather than us being hit with it in one go. So perhaps what we need to look at is perhaps agreeing a figure that is a sort of annual payment into that fund to cover maintenance.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Also, of course, the rent, we won't be paying the rent, so that's in the budget, but I understand we won't be paying it, will we?
No, that's right. You see down here, it's been taken.
Okay.
So
yeah, we'll still pay rent to the church, so that £15,000 a year will be paid.
Yeah, sorry, not to the community association. I mean, for this room. So that figure isn't, you know, although you've taken it off here, it's a loss of last year's budget, isn't it? So maybe we could just transfer that over to maintenance. So that's 6,000, well, that's 7,000 we've been paying rent for here. Maybe if we added that to the maintenance figure you got, that's 8,000 at least, and that's not increasing the.
Oh, I tried to avoid it.
That's not increasing the budget at all.
It goes back.
If you know what I mean. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not entirely sure. I can't see a 7,000 anywhere.
Well, we've been paying 7,000 for this room for the last week.
Well, we pay 800 a month, I think. Yeah, well, that might turn out to be 7,000. My math.
Yeah, that budget's in the office cost budget.
Yeah, it's in the other budget anyway.
But it's not for next year, though, is it?
No.
No, it's taken out next year.
That's what I mean.
So it's gone out of. Oh, you see. So you mean take it out
across to our stream.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I do think realistically we probably need to put in more than £1,000.
Needs to be 10, 15 minimum. I think if you've had a leak, or you know, hopefully you won't have to spend it. But it's a major building. You know, even 15 grand wouldn't scratch the surface if something went wrong. Something like, you know, something major went wrong. But
I think, the decision is, do we put more in the budget, or do we say that we hope it doesn't happen, and if it does, we use contingency? I've got Rebecca and then Pam.
Thanks. Yeah, I just think a leak or a boiler going is the very definition of contingency in my book, because they're not things that you plan to happen. And it also feels a little bit odd putting such a massive sinking fund in the year that we're hoping to see grant funding come in to do a major refurb, because when we know what our building actually looks like, and you know, we'll have a better idea, I think, of the sorts of maintenance issues that are going to come up. So I can see it being increased a little bit, but up to 10,000-15,000 seems way too much to me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Pam, you're on mute.
You're talking about things like the boiler going. Surely MCA is fully insured for everything like this. We shouldn't have to have a contingency fund for things like that. It should already be insured. by them under the building insurance.
OCA.
Okay.
Yeah, that's possible. I don't know, because I'm not sure whether they would have such a high level of insurance that it would cover.
Why not?
Large, because the premiums would be enormous.
Well, it seems sensible, and no matter what the premium is, you cover it for the, you don't say about your house, oh, well, I'm not going to insure it because I don't like the cost. Surely it's been their job to make sure that the place is fully insured, and there shouldn't need to be 15,000 contingency for this. You're just paying a few hundred in insurance in the first place. Just a thought.
Only Paul could tell us that. It seems unlikely to me, but I'm sure Paul will be able to tell us.
Yeah, I'm not aware of them having insurance for that sort of thing, because I know Christine has been quite keen ever since we've been involved to try and get a new boiler in. So I don't think that's something that they've got covered. And I think you mentioned the sinking fund. I guess the best time to bring that in would be when the building is refurbished or whatever happens with that, because then you could have a percentage of the contract value. So I think that's probably something to think about as part of the refurbishment proposals.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Sarah.
I was just going to say, all this talk of boilers is stressing me out a bit, because I thought part of the Ostream makeover was going to be sensible renewable stuff that would be cheaper. Yeah, I know. Well, hopefully soon rather than later.
Right, okay, so
£5,000.
I was going to say, can I make a suggestion? We increase it a small amount, but not by a significant amount. I was going to suggest 3,000. Will suggest 5,000. So can we take a vote on 3 first?
3.
Or whether people feel that's sufficient. If not, we can up it to 5. So those who feel that a budget of 3,000 on the expectation that we are going to be having a major refurb soon. But if people disagree with that, we can look at Will's suggestion of 5.
I think 5 because prices have gone up.
Okay, well, first, those in favour of 3,000 as an appropriate figure. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, up there, 5, 6, 7. Right, those who would want it to be higher, in other words, those against 3,000. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And Rob
6. Okay, well, there's 7 in favour of 3,000, so we've agreed on 3,000 for that budget. Okay, right, so can we now just then vote to agree on the Austrian budget as a whole with the 3,000 increase, 3,000 for maintenance? Are we all now happy with it?
Yep.
Well, no,
Yeah.
they also just vote against
Yeah.
I'm joking, yeah. I haven't enough time yet, but
Okay, right. Thanks, Paul. I think that was all, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much for that. Thank you for, at least we got those bits ticked off already. Right, now, I'm slightly confused by item 10 because my understanding was this was going to be discussed at Community and Social Committee before it came back to this full council, but I'm also aware that Social and Community were in quorum and therefore weren't able to have a meeting in December. So are we now looking at deferring this to enable Community and Social to discuss it first?
No. No.
What are we, so you're wanting us to?
Yeah.
Fine, thanks. Agree items 1, 2 and 3 or just item 2?
Can we take it one at a time, please?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have to agree, are we in agreement that standing orders are suspended so that we can actually discuss this again?
Yes.
Right. Okay, we now go on to part 2. Pam, if you talk this through, what we need to do with this?
Paul has the exact figures for this, I'm sure, but Paul needs to have permission from us to put the fencing for Langland out for tender because the prices of the fencing are mind-bogglingly higher than we did for courts 1 and 2. He has discussed it with One Voice Wales and it's been advised by One Voice Wales that it has to go out for tender. So that this is simply giving Paul permission to put the land and fencing out for tender, which is what we are obliged to do. And we also have been told by One Voice Wales that we need to engage a qualified professional to deal with it for us. So we'll be legally sound, and that's the advice we'd had from One Voice Wales. So we need to give Paul permission to push ahead with this, and this is simply what it's for. If you've got any questions, I'm sure Paul can give you the figures. Sorry.
Sorry, Pam, there's a third part to it, which is
No, we're just dealing with item 2 at the moment.
just item 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Okay, so all those in, oh, well.
Sorry. So that One Voice Wales have said we have to employ a surveyor, because at the end of the day, it's a fence and it's going in, you know, poles going into ground. We're asking for the same spec as courts 1 and 2, and they say we need a surveyor for that.
Paul?
Yeah. Paul.
No, what their advice was we need to go out to tender. Our standing orders, sorry, our financial regulations say if you're going out to tender, then you should consider obtaining appropriate advice from a professional in this area. And my view is that to go out to tender, there's a lot more involved than just getting quotes. And that's why I personally think it's obviously more expensive, but it's the way forward, because it's something that we could hand over to them. They could go ahead and then they could come back to the council with the tenders they received and a recommendation on who should be appointed, and then that would be for council. For Pam's committee, and then for council to consider that recommendation.
Okay, thanks. Just to add to what Paul said, I probably, although I didn't agree with this before, having had a meeting and discussion about the requirements of lottery funding, which I know is not relevant here, but the expectation is always that the tendering process is run by a qualified professional. So
if I could come back there, remember that when if I could come back there, remember that when we had somebody who took us to the National Audit Wales over the skate park, we had to go right back and show them every piece of paper that we'd used, and I mean literally every piece of paper. Thank God we found it in the back of the cupboard. So if anybody ever wants to challenge this, it makes us sure, it makes us safe. And I think if that's the RFO's advice on this, then who else's advice are we going to take? I think we have to protect him and we have to protect the council in case there's somebody out there decides to be bloody minded and take us to the Audit Commission over this, even though we know that we've done everything by the book. We have to be absolutely sure. If that's what One Voice Wales is advising and Paul is advising, I suggest we go with their advice.
okay, thanks, Pam. Ian, and then I'll come to you, Will, but Ian's had his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Well, what we're dealing with is quite clear. It's the procurement going out to a professional at a cost of 3,000 or 4,000. I notice there is no mention of the cost of the fencing, which is going to be in the region of 35,000. And there's a proviso on that doesn't cover the trees that are down there. And it doesn't cover the fact that the roots may be in the way of getting the posts in. And again, we have the old chestnut of the wall. Now, I can see this, spiraling out of control. It's we're talking roughly on the table at the moment, £40,000. And if there are issues with the trees and the tree roots, i.e. the stumps have to come out as well. And in the process of that, there's any more damage done to the wall, which is in a disgusting state, we're going to be heading up to 80,000 plus.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So,
okay, thank you, Ian. Tender process.
I don't want to make you.
what this proposal is, which is the tendering process. When those tenders come back, we can have that conversation about whether we accept them or not. But all we're looking at the moment is actually getting agreement that Paul can appoint someone to put this out to tender. So can we stick to that point, please?
Well, the thing is, Chair, that, you know, if you want to be particular about it, this should have been dealt with quite some time ago, to be perfectly honest. As far as item number 3 is concerned, you know,
Yeah,
we had the chance of a £10,000 grant from the LTA to put in the lockable gates. But there was a section on community council that turned that down.
We're not on 3.
So can we just leave that for another time? Because
I'm not happy about this.
Oh.
Not happy about it.
What did you want to say?
I just want to say, obviously, I'm happy to vote for it if we're being told by Paul that it's in our financial regulations. However, I know we've talked about putting something to do something on the website for volunteers and voluntary things, and I'm wondering if we put a call out to the community, for example, to ask, is there any surveyors out there, retired or maybe still working, that can help us, you know, regularly on small projects like this? You know, they're still qualified. They might well do it for nothing as a little side job, you know, or not side job.
We just have to be very careful about the liability if
they're still insured. Yeah, that's good.
not necessarily, they don't have the indemnity.
Yeah, but if I was a surveyor working in the area, for example, and qualified to do so, it's such a small amount of work that you probably, you know, do it for a community, to help the community. So I'm just wondering, we might be worth us putting a call out for something like that.
Okay, thanks, Will. Sarah.
I think that's great, Will. I think my concern is this whole setup is to keep us removed from the process, so no one can come back at us.
Yeah.
And all it takes is for someone to say, oh, you know that person, they came forward and then we'd be stuck again saying, oh, friends of friends, even though we know it was completely honest and they did it for free, we'd be back to trying to justify our situation. So yeah, I agree, it would be the sensible thing to do, but it's whether we would be covered as well as.
Yeah, okay, so can we move to a vote to approve Paul appointing a qualified professional to undertake the tendering process for the fencing for Langland Tennis Courts? Those in favour, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Right, now point number 3.
I'd like this to be taken off, please. We were supposed to have discussed it and come up with direct figures to give full council in the December meeting, but that wasn't correct, it didn't go ahead. I know Rebecca was very involved with this. I'd like it if we could wait till the next community meeting, invite Rebecca along and just get ourselves sorted before we come back to council with this. I really don't think we have enough information to offer council at the moment to ask you to make a considered vote on this. So I'd like this dropped from the agenda, please.
Yeah, okay, we did actually agree to refer this back to committee at the last meeting. So really all we're doing is reiterating that on the basis that unfortunately their last meeting wasn't quorate. So are we all happy that this is referred back to committee and they report to our February meeting?
One point, if we don't pass it before March, the grant money is gone.
Well, this would be February's meeting.
Okay, but just for everyone to know, if it gets passed on and then the grant money is not possible.
Okay, so are we all in agreement that this is referred back for community and social to discuss, to make a full recommendation to next full council? All those in favour? Brilliant, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, right, item 11, Mumblesfest Task and Finish Group Terms of Reference, which you all have. This was, if you remember, the Task and Finish Group was asked to just go back through them, and I'm struggling here to find them. to make an agreement on them. So this is obviously what we've come forward with. So if there is anybody got any comments or anything about them?
Mary, there was
Right, sorry, Phil, yeah.
a discussion regarding Paul's ability to be able to make general payments.
Oh, to contractors.
That's right,
Yeah.
contractors. And I didn't see anything.
No, you're right. I think this is something that I noticed as well. What we need ideally to add into the terms of reference, and I know Steve has somewhere, which as I say, I'm struggling to find, has suggested under item 4, point D, I believe, is that right, Steve?
That's right, Chair, yes.
Yeah, that we add in that the RFO is given delegated power to tender and contract all the core suppliers. That's people like the marquee, the portaloos, the fencing, security. It's nothing to do with the actual events. It's not to do with the people that we get in to provide food or drink. It's not to do with entertainment. It's purely the infrastructure contracts that will enable the RFO to be able to just go ahead and crack on with those without everything having to keep coming back to full council. Okay, so that is a recommendation that we add that in as one of the terms of reference. So could we just ask first if we're happy with that, and then obviously we'll ask if there's any further comments that anyone has. So is everyone happy that we add that into the terms of reference? Yeah, excellent, thanks. Okay, so has anybody got any further questions about the terms of reference that have now been to full council, back to task and finish group? So hopefully they're now at a point where we can all agree them. Rebecca.
Sorry, it's not a question. It's just to say I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to give apologies for the rest of the meeting. And also, you won't have seen, but Richard has also just
I did see,
totally
yeah.
different things that are dragging us away, I'm sure. But he's also just given apologies for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. So can we then move to a vote to agree the terms of reference for Mumbles Fest Task and Finish group? All those in favour? Right, that's everybody here and everybody there. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, we're almost there. Right, we're still for it, so we're okay. We're just for it, just in this room, actually. Right, are there any questions for the chair of the Finance Committee? No, jolly good. Are there any questions to the chair of the Community and Social Committee?
Maybe just if we could open up a discussion for the Mumbles businesses.
That wouldn't be that one really, would it?
Would that be Community and Social?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Right, are there any questions for the chair of the Environmental Committee? Helen has a question for herself.
No, I was going to raise the same point that Angela just did. And what point? Because earlier in the meeting, I said I wanted to make a proposal, but we weren't able to. We had to wait to this session. So now that I've got the floor, at what point am I allowed to do that?
Well, it's just that you can ask any of the committees to put it on their next agenda just by contacting the clerk and the chair.
Well, either it goes on the Community and Social, or in a previous, I think it was the October Environment Committee, we agreed that Angela and I would meet the Mumbles traders, and I got the contact off Rob. And so Angela, I messaged you, I think just very recently, about trying to arrange that meeting. So I wonder whether we can just, in the immediate instance, take it forward in that, and then just come back with a bit of a plan.
Yeah, sounds sensible.
Or do people have an alternative?
It comes under Phil's committee, so maybe that's something that you and him can do jointly.
Well, that was.
Yeah, whether Phil wants to join. I mean, it's,
Can,
it's
if
not
Phil doesn't,
exclusive.
can I you got, Helen?
Yeah, it's not exclusive.
Yeah, so it's up to that committee to make that.
Well, I'd be more than happy for Rob to deputise as needs be, but I'd still like to sort of be able to attend as well. Rob, you're more than welcome to be involved.
Thanks, Phil.
So
And,
Sorry, Phil.
we make that an open group, so anybody else wishing to attend, and we'll do it as joint heads.
So can I just check with the clerk? Perhaps we could set that up as a working group. And anybody who's interested can put their names down to join that. Is that the best way to do it, Clark?
Yeah, certainly. If everyone here is interested, can let me know. I can then pass the news on.
Brilliant. Okay, so anyone who's interested in this working group to look at support for businesses, put your email to the clerk.
Yes, I am, but also, does that mean that Michael, for example, or anyone from the public can join that working group if they want to as well?
The working group can ask and agree that people be co-opted. They don't come on automatically, but if it's agreed that they can be co-opted, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
it might be like you said,
this person, because
he
he
might have some ideas. Yeah, exactly. And Michael, if you've got ideas as well, you can.
Okay, so anyone who's interested in being on that group, contact the clerk. He will record all the names, and then a meeting can be set up. Okay, thanks for that, Helen.
I have a question, Helen.
Right,
That's separate.
Will has a question for you, Helen.
I sent a message to the group yesterday with a grant application for fountains. I was wondering if you could,
Fountains.
Yes, we sent it on to the community council. There's a
I never got it.
Hang on. It's environmental committee. I said, would you be seachanges.org.uk coastal fountains fund.
Oh, fountains.
It's a grant.
I take it this is drinking fountains.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did honestly think you meant mental one.
It's for fountains. It's just
Versailles.
it's a cut down on drinking bottles going in the sea, so it might be worth us applying for that. But just bring.
Yeah, sorry, it didn't come to me for some reason, but yeah,
It is on the group, Phil. I saw that. So can I just make? Sorry. Can I just say one thing as an update? Because I just wonder whether councillors wondering what the heck's going on. So ages ago, I asked councillors what street furniture they wanted, and we made a short list and a long list. And we are still ploughing on with that, and we are hoping the short list will be completed in the current financial year, and the long list will be achieved next financial year. So people like Will and Ian and Pam, who all sent ideas in, and Rian, it is all still moving forward, just a bit slowly because it's tied in with a lot of other things. But the progress is being made, albeit very slowly.
Helen, can I ask something, Chair?
yes, okay, yes.
Yeah, because we've been recently going through the whole glyphosate and natural weed cleaning in Mumbles. Have you still got that on your budget to carry on with that? Lydia thought we did. Helen?
The thing we kept on was it's called the grass verge scheme. Is that what you're referring to?
No, we did have an extra cleansing budget.
I think that needs to be, you're on environmental, so that's something we can discuss surely in environment. Sorry,
we were on environment.
Yeah, but what I think is it's really for other people who are not on the committee. If they've got any questions, we'll obviously be discussing it in the committee anyway.
Right, okay.
So sorry, but it's just to try and save time now.
Yeah.
So anyone who won't be involved in discussions about the environmental budget at the next meeting, has anyone got any other comments for Helen? Okay, and finally, questions to the chair of Culture, Tourism and Marketing.
We have a discussion about what we have.
Okay, anybody got any questions?
Just, if you remember, I asked you to bear in mind the new website for the Ostream.
Yes.
And if we could add that, and I think if we could think about when we're doing that.
Did you put in your budget proposal for it, Will?
I didn't know because I just assumed you were, I assumed you were organised, but I'll.
I'm organised. I appreciate that, but no, there hasn't been a new budget proposal from me for that. I've already put one in for the Warm Hub. And there was another one, Paul, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know I've put in a couple. So no, sorry, Will, that one slipped us by there.
Yeah, no worries. It's just it's obviously going to be quite crucial because the Ostream Centre website at the moment, it's okay, but
non-existent really.
Yeah, I was being polite. Yeah, but it's not great. So we probably need to, get something which is fit for purpose and higher, and people can even see what's on it, and
I think there's a lot up for discussion regarding the website and things, and there's certain things that we need to get into place. Like we were just talking about this in terms of key performance indicators with our provider at the moment. And obviously at some point in the next year we're going to have to come back to council to discuss what those findings are really. So hopefully we can move on.
3 to 5 grand, I'd say, if you could put that in the budget, it'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of backlog. We say on our website, we're still waiting on our website, we're waiting on Norton Nature. So there are a number of ones in the pipeline, which maybe Ostream might have to join the queue.
The websites. Well, in that case, we just do a template. We just
ideally
get a template. Yeah, we could generate.
Anyway, can we? Yeah. So it's dealt with. You're going to deal with directly
Phil said
for that.
Phil said you do the form, so.
Right.
We'll watch the recording.
Be more welcome to come on to the next CTC to discuss.
Right, I'll see that.
Okay. If nobody else has got any further questions for Phil, we can close the meeting. Thank goodness. We don't have to go over time.